expected to announce soon that he won't recertify the Iranian nuclear deal, but that may not mean the U.S. is pulling out of it altogether. The White House press secretary Sarah Sanders indicated this is all part of a larger strategy.
The president isn't looking at one piece of this. He's looking at all of the bad behavior of Iran, not just the nuclear deal as bad behavior, but the ballistic missile testing, destabilizing of the region, #1 state sponsor of terrorism, cyber attacks, illicit nuclear program. He wants to look for a broad strategy that addresses all of those problems, not just one-offing those. That's what his team is focused on, and that's what he'll be rolling out to address that as a whole in the coming days.
Nile Gardiner joins me now. He's the director of the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Nile, good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Gillian.
So, as we understand it now, if the president decides not to recertify Iran, it doesn't actually kill the entire nuclear deal, but rather sort of kicks it over to the Congress for them to make a decision. Is that right?
Well, that's right. It doesn't immediately kill the deal. However, it does place tremendous pressure on the deal, and I think this is the right approach. I think the president is correct not to recertify what is, in my view, a disastrous agreement signed by President Obama, really as an act of appeasement towards Iran. This deal does nothing whatsoever to enhance, in the long term, the security of the free world. And so decertification of this deal then throws the ball over to Congress. Congress has 60 days to reimpose U.S. sanctions against Tehran. My sense is that Congress is likely to do so, and this certainly could well unravel the entire deal, which I think the president views as what he called it an embarrassment, actually, to the United States. I think it's a deal that fundamentally does not address the major threat that Iran poses to the free world. So I think it's a bad agreement. It's an agreement that fundamentally undermines the security of the free world.
Well, you know, a lot of critics of the deal who agree with you that it undermines U.S. national security interests, that it perhaps paves the way for Iran to develop a nuclear weapon faster than it otherwise would. A lot of those same critics say, even though it's a bad deal, reneging now 2 years in is likely to be more harmful than helpful, and that it's not a good strategic calculation for the United States. It's too costly. What do you say to that?
Well, I disagree with those arguments, actually. I think under this agreement, and already this is 2 years into the deal now, Iran has been able to unfreeze about $100 billion worth of foreign assets. That's about a third of Iran's GDP. Huge amounts of money are flowing into Tehran as a result of growing business deals, largely between European companies and Tehran. Also money flowing in from Russia, China as well. And so the Iranian regime is growing far, far richer. It is growing more aggressive and more assertive. It's building up its conventional weapons capability. It's testing ballistic missiles. Eventually, within 10 to 15 years, through this deal, Iran will become a nuclear weapons power, and it will directly threaten the United States, America's allies in the Middle East, but also Europe as well. And so I don't see how it's in Europe's interest, for example, to keep this deal together, as European capitals will be directly threatened, actually, once the sunset clauses of the deal come into effect.
But let's say that the president reneges on the deal. He said that part of his motivation for doing this is, part of his opposition to the deal is that he thinks he can hatch a better deal with the Europeans, with the P5+1 countries that signed on to the original deal. But the Iranians have already put a stake in the sand. They've said, if the United States reneges on this deal, that's it. We're not coming back to the table in any way, shape, or form. This dialogue over nuclear development, our nuclear program, is effectively dead. So if this all plays out, how do you see the European community and the United States moving forward on this? Is it back to the sanctions regime? Is there something else the president has in mind? What do you think's going to happen?
Well, there's no doubt about it that there's very strong opposition to renegotiating the deal, not only from Iran, but also from the European Union, from the big European powers, also from Russia and China. I think the prospects for renegotiation for the deal are very, very low. I do think the best course of action for the United States is to reimpose US sanctions against Tehran, also to impose sanctions against foreign entities doing business actually with the Iranian regime. That will have a chilling effect upon European investment pouring into Iran. But ultimately, I do see the Iran nuclear deal as a suicide pact actually between the West and Iran. This is a deal that will certainly undermine, I think, the long-term security of the entire free world. And this is a deal, after all, signed by President Obama without the support of Congress, without the support of the American people. This is a deal, frankly, that, in my view, greatly strengthens the hand of Iran, which is why Iran clings so strongly to this deal. It's very important, I think, that President Trump lead on the world stage. It's not the position of Angela Merkel or Emmanuel Macron to dictate US foreign policy. It is up to the US president to decide what is in the best interest of the American people. It's in the best interest of the American people to hold Iran to account. And I do believe that this deal itself actually is absolutely disastrous for US interests, and that the United States should begin the process of withdrawing from the deal.
Nile, let's hope that the president and the Congress is able to cobble together a new sanctions regime quickly in response to this, if this all goes forward. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Gillian.